What's up guys, welcome back to Fancy Goldfish Fanatics. Today we have another episode of Rate My Tank, so make sure you stay tuned to find out more. Hey Fanatics family, welcome back. As always, check out those links in the description and make sure you check out our website. Today we are doing an episode of Rate My Tank, and on this episode we have, I think, potentially all of the tanks are our subscribers' tanks, so it's really cool to get lots of entries. I've even got a few more entries that are going to go into the next episode of Rate My Tank, so if you did not see your tank show up in this video, then don't worry, I have got it ready for the episode after. If you do want to have your tank featured in a video just like this one, then leave me a little comment down below. But without further ado, let's check out these amazing tanks, because we have some really stunning tanks to see in the video today. So I'll catch you in a minute.
A few moments later.
First up, we have our first submission by Wild Animations. So thank you so much for your submission. Absolutely loving the planted Fancy Goldfish tank. Now we don't see too many heavily planted Fancy Goldfish tanks, just like this one here. Looks like it's potentially a dual Rio 180 or a dual Rio 240. It has that inbuilt filter in the back, which is the dual bioflow filter. Absolutely love these filters. They provide a really good holder for your media of choice. I really like pimping these filters and adding my own biomedia to them, like biohome or ceramic balls, and then having a few layers of sponge in the top. I can see we've gone in this tank for a white sand, and I'm really liking the bubble wall effect that we have in the background. As you can see, the same on my tank. Yours looks very nice and has a nice neat layer of bubbles. Really liking those accent stones and the use of bits of driftwood and bogwood throughout the tank. Creates a really naturalistic looking scape. Looks like we've got some Amazon swords in there, some Elodia, I'm not sure what other plants, maybe some Java ferns or some type of Anubias, and some Vallisneria at the back. But really liking the overall look of this tank. Very clean and very natural looking, and I'm sure the goldfish absolutely love this tank. As the fish get older and larger, I'm not sure how they're going to do with the plants. Maybe they might start being a bit more boisterous if they potentially spawn and knock into them. But currently the tank looks absolutely fabulous, and I really like it. It's generally what looks like a normal tropical community tank, but we have the addition of goldfish. And it just shows you guys at home the different boundaries that we can take with our goldfish and the different scapes and ideas we can look at when setting up a goldfish tank. I really like the fact that the filter is hidden. I can't really see too much equipment apart from that filter, which for me personally is a big thumbs up there. So I really like the tank. Looks like it's really well maintained. The plants look absolutely great condition, no algae, and the back is nice and clear. And I'm really liking the backdrop as well. You can see, I don't know if it's the wall or if there is a 3D background behind the tank, something like that, but it creates a really nice white contrasting effect, especially with that white sand underneath. So I absolutely love this tank, and I'm gonna give this tank a 4.8 out of 5 stars. Wouldn't change a thing, absolutely love it. Great setup, and thank you for the submission. The next submission we have is from Debbie, so thank you so much Debbie for this submission. And I have seen this tank on our Fancy Goldfish Fanatics Facebook group for quite a while now, and I really wanted Debbie to do a submission because I absolutely love this tank as well. Now it is another planted Fancy Goldfish tank, as you can see. It has those contrasting black substrate with those vibrant green plants on the background, and I believe most of those green plants on the background are fake, but there are some real plants mixed in there as well. I'm really liking the use of those fake plants as well. It really creates a bit of depth in the tank and makes the tank look a lot bigger than it actually is. Really liking the different varieties of veranda we have, some blacks, I think there might be calico, red and white in there. Really, really nice. And I'm liking those round, smooth river pebbles on the bottom as well. Now, it's always really good to have nice, smooth and no blunt objects in the tank, because our fancy goldfish can be quite boisterous and cumbersome and can damage themselves quite easily. Looks like we have some cories in there as well. And it'll be really interesting to see how the cories have done in their long term. I know many hobbyists have small cories and have the fish actually pick them up and eat them, and the cory spine has gone straight into the mouth and caused a fatality for both fish. So I generally wouldn't advise keeping cories and fancy goldfish together. However, if you are going to do it, please make sure the cories are really big, or as big as possible, so that the fancy goldfish cannot pick them up and get them into their mouth. But clearly Debbie has had good success keeping the two species together, and her tank just shows how well these fish are kept. The maintenance obviously is quite high on this tank to keep it looking in such pristine condition. I'm not sure how she cleans those fake plants at the back of the tank and minimises the amount of algae on them. Maybe she has some plecos or some kind of algae eater in there as well. But overall, absolutely love this tank. Looks like we've got some little bloodworm feeders at the top as well, which are really cool to put some frozen bloodworm in, watch them defrost and the fish pull them out of those little baskets. Really nice idea, and something I generally don't see on too many fancy goldfish tanks. Overall, really liking that sort of darker substrate and the dark background, and it really helps accent those fish. I personally wouldn't change anything about this tank, may potentially add a little bit more air into it, but that is just a personal preference. I'm sure the filtration setup on this tank is completely adequate because the fish look in absolutely superb condition. So I'm actually going to give this one slightly higher score than the last one at 4.9 out of 5 stars, because I absolutely love this tank. It has been done so well, and both tanks, this one and the last one, are absolutely amazing for fancy goldfish, but this one personally just tips the scale. It looks really nice, and I've never seen someone do this fake plant wall with some real plants as well, so I just absolutely love this tank. Next up, we have a submission from Tommy. Thank you, Tommy, for this submission. Absolutely love your fancy goldfish tank, and I haven't seen this one before, but I absolutely love the way it's set out. Really liking the use of the plants at the side with a central Buddha feature. Looks like we've got two Fluval FX6s on the bottom, which will provide completely ample filtration for this system with this number of goldfish. I'm also liking the different varieties we have as well. Looks like we've got two Fluval heaters in the background, maintaining the temperature and keeping the temperature slightly elevated. Many hobbyists don't want to heat their fancy goldfish tanks, but many do, and often if you do heat your tank, the fish's metabolism is increased a little bit, so they can get a little bit more food in the system and grow a little bit faster. I'm really liking the use of the natural plants. Looks like we've got some Salvinia minima floating on the surface, and then a few terrestrial plants placed on top of the tank. I think these might be a veggie style filter where the water is actually pumped through these trays, which have got some sort of biomedia in them and that hold the plants and let them use up the nutrients, which really helps minimize algae in the tank. Using plants and goldfish is a combination which I absolutely love. I'm not sure if you can see, but in the background of this tank, I do have some pothos that is growing in the water as well. And I really like to use those plants as a natural nutrient export in addition to water changes as well. As you can see, Tommy's got some pothos in the back corner as well, and I'm really liking the use of the Alodia in there and the Vallisneria as well. Obviously, we've got some white sand, which the goldfish are constantly turning over to keep that nice and clean. Often, you may find that white sand can look dirty in certain tanks if it doesn't have the correct maintenance done to it. But because there's quite a few goldfish in this tank and they're constantly turning over that sand, it is keeping it nice and clean for the hobbyist. Overall, really like this tank. It's an absolutely great setup for the fish, and I'm going to give this one a 4.6 out of 5 star. Another very, very good tank with little I would change about it, but really nice to see the overall look of this tank and the use of those natural plants with the fish. Now, finally up, we have a slightly different tank to those three we previously seen. This one's a little bit more minimalistic, which personally I really like. And you can have a heavily planted fancy goldfish tank or a nice minimalistic tank as well, and I personally like both of them. We can see we have some sponge filters on this tank. We have Also a fluval, maybe 406 on this tank, but clearly we've got adequate filtration for the number of fish in it. We've also got that pothos, which is growing out of the top, providing a nice nutrient export. And then we have that little group of pebbles on the bottom to create that nice minimalistic scape, which is what I'm personally thinking about potentially doing in my tank as well. I can see it different to the other tanks we've seen. This tank is a bare bottom. Now, often I find bare bottoms are much easier to keep, much easier to keep the water cleaner and helping lower nutrients within the system. However, many hobbyists do like to have the sandy or gravel substrate, as it is a little bit more naturalistic for the fish, and they can sift through it. So there are two positives and negatives to it. Bare bottom, maybe not as natural for the fish, and they can't sift through that sand, which is a natural thing that they would do. However, you do have the benefit of keeping the water clean. Now, I really like this setup, nice and minimalistic as I said, and it clearly has a low stocking density as well. Couple this with regular water changes, you're going to be able to grow the fish really well in this tank. And this tank is more suited, I would say, to the fish rather than the hobbyist. The past 3 tanks we saw was a combination of both, something that looks aesthetically pleasing but also provides a nice tank for the fish. But I would say this tank is a little bit more aimed at the health and growing of the fish rather than the hobbyist's aesthetical look in the tank. But I really like this tank overall, very nice, liking the different variety of fancy goldfish. If it was my tank, I'd probably add maybe a couple more fancy goldfish because it is quite understocked, but obviously these fish will grow in time and this will provide an adequate sized aquarium for these fish in due course. Potentially, if you could, I would try and hide those sponge filters, just for aesthetic reasons, and that's just a personal choice. But it doesn't provide any, it won't provide any difference to the fish having the sponge filters out in the open or not. But personally, I would see if there's a way you could hide it, maybe behind some kind of plants or something, or potentially create a fake wall, like a fake sump that you can keep them in, like I have in the back of this tank, just so it's the main display is a little bit clear of equipment. But that is just a personal preference and there is nothing wrong with having them in the tank. In fact, they probably provide a nice little holding ground for leftover food that the goldfish can rummage through and give them something to do. Overall, really like this tank, loving the minimalistic scape and really liking the overall health and cleanliness of this tank. The owner clearly puts a lot of care into it. I'm going to give this tank a 4.4 out of 5 stars. Absolutely great tank. So thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing the huge multitude of different tanks we had, and every single tank we had on the video was absolutely stunning, and I really enjoyed watching the videos through and also narrating back to you guys as well. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you would like to have your tank featured on a video just like this one, or you'd like to submit a slightly longer video, we can always do a video in the tank tours series where we go into a little bit more in depth about maintenance, care, filters, filter media, goldfish in particular, and a bit more specifics about your system with a little bit more details. So that is the end of today's video. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have any video suggestions, you can leave those down in the comment section. But as always, thank you all for watching. Remember to keep those water changes up, and happy fish keeping.